The virgin bride was about to be burned until a drunken cowboy fired into the air. The sun was dipping low over the small town of Willow Creek, painting the dusty streets with shades of orange and gold. Birds were chirping their last songs before nightfall, and a soft breeze carried the smell of fresh hay from the nearby fields. The town itself was quiet, almost too quiet, as though it were holding its breath for something important. Wooden houses lined the main street, their porches worn from years of use, and a few children ran about chasing each other with laughter that echoed through the empty lanes.
This was a town where everyone knew everyone else, where secrets were hard to keep and traditions ran deep, sometimes too deep. In the middle of this calm, Mary Thompson was getting ready for the most important day of her life.
Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the simple white dress her mother had made for her.
It wasn't fancy, but it was perfect in its own way.
Mary ran her fingers over the delicate lace along the neckline, thinking of the man she was about to marry. She loved him. She truly did, but there was a tight knot of nervousness in her stomach that wouldn't go away. Her reflection in the cracked mirror told a story of excitement and fear tangled together like threads in a worn piece of cloth. Mary's mother, Mrs. Thompson, bustled around the small bedroom, smoothing the folds of the dress and fussing over Mary's hair.
"Now, don't be so nervous, Mary."
"You've been waiting for this day for so long," she said gently, brushing a stray curl from her daughter's face. Her voice was calm, but Mary could hear the worry hidden underneath. In Willow Creek, weddings were big events, but they were also a reminder of the town's old ways, and sometimes old ways could be harsh. Mary took a deep breath and tried to calm herself. She looked out the window at the streets below. People were already gathering for the ceremony. Neighbors leaned on fences, nodding politely to one another, while children chased a dog that barked and yipped happily. The sight should have brought her comfort, but instead it made her heart race even faster. She knew that once the ceremony was over, there would be no turning back. Marriage in Willow Creek was not just a union of two people. It was a joining of families, and families here had rules that could be strict and unyielding. Meanwhile, in the small saloon at the edge of town, the faint smell of smoke and whiskey hung in the air. It was quieter than usual for a Friday evening, with only a few men sitting at the worn wooden tables, quietly playing cards or nursing their drinks. Among them was Jake, a tall man with rough hands and a scruffy beard, who leaned lazily against the bar. He had a reputation in town, part wanderer, part gambler, part troublemaker. But tonight he seemed almost thoughtful, staring at the amber liquid in his glass, listening to the murmurs of townsfolk talking about the wedding. Back at the Thompson home, Mary's little brother Tommy peeked into the room. "You look pretty, Mary," he said shyly, holding his hands behind his back. Mary smiled, ruffling his hair.
Thank you, Tommy.
"I just hope I do everything right tonight." She didn't say what she meant by everything right. Deep down, she feared the unknown. She had grown up hearing stories about old customs and strict family rules, and while some were harmless, others could be frightening if one was not careful. The wedding ceremony was to take place in the town church, a small building with whitewashed walls and tall windows that let in the last light of day. Mary could hear the faint sound of the organ from the Thompson home, a soft, melodic tune that seemed to make her heart beat faster. She could also hear her own heartbeat, loud and insistent, reminding her that this was real, that soon she would step into a world she had only imagined, in her dreams and in her fears. As Mary descended the creaky wooden stairs, her mother holding her hand, she could see the townspeople gathered outside. They were smiling, whispering, and nodding at her as she passed, but some faces were serious, almost wary. It was the way of Willow Creek. People celebrated joyfully but always watched closely, ensuring that everyone followed the traditions that had been passed down for generations. Mary's father, a kind man with tired eyes, gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "Be strong, Mary," he whispered. "Remember, your heart is your guide." Break. Sunlight filtered through the stained glass, casting colorful patterns on the wooden pews. Friends and neighbors filled the seats, their murmurs blending with the faint echo of the organ. Mary's eyes searched for her husband-to-be among the crowd. When she saw him, standing nervously at the front, she felt a rush of warmth and relief. Grasp. He gave her a small, reassuring smile, and, for a moment, the fear that had been gripping her seemed to fade. The ceremony began with quiet reverence. The preacher spoke words of love, commitment, and partnership. Mary listened intently, feeling the weight of the promises she was about to make. Breaths. She held her husband's hand tightly, drawing strength from his presence. Around her, the townspeople watched, some smiling, some serious, all deeply invested in the event. Willow Creek, weddings were not just personal milestones. They were communal celebrations, moments when the town itself felt alive and connected. Even as the ceremony progressed, a subtle tension lingered in Mary's mind. She had grown up hearing stories of the older generation's strict rules, and she knew that sometimes these rules could be frightening. Aspects and knobs in his mouth died, yet she tried to focus on the love she felt, on the man beside her, and on the hope that this new chapter in her life would bring happiness and safety. After the ceremony, there was a small gathering outside the church. The townspeople offered congratulations, and laughter filled the air. Children ran through the streets, and the smell of fresh bread and roasted meat from nearby homes added a comforting sense of normalcy. Mary felt herself relaxing slightly, allowing herself to enjoy the small joys of the day. However, as the sun dipped further below the horizon and shadows stretched across the town, Mary could not shake a lingering unease. There were whispers, subtle glances exchanged among some of the older townsfolk. She didn't understand what they meant, but the feeling of being watched and judged was unmistakable. She tried to dismiss it, telling herself that it was just her imagination, that everything would be fine once they reached her new home. Meanwhile, Jake was finishing his drink at the saloon, unaware that his path would soon cross with Mary's in a way he could never have imagined. Breath. He stretched and let out a long sigh, feeling the weight of the day and the familiar pull of wanderlust. He did not know that his instincts for fairness and courage would soon be tested in a situation that demanded action, not hesitation. Mary and her husband finally left the church, stepping into the quiet evening air. The streets of Willow Creek were bathed in the soft glow of lanterns, and the gentle hum of crickets filled the silence. The couple walked hand in hand, hearts full of hope and apprehension, unaware of the challenges that awaited them in the privacy of their new home. As Mary approached the wooden door of her new home, she felt a mix of excitement and fear. This was her future, her life unfolding in front of her eyes. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever lay ahead. Little did she know that the coming hours would test her courage in ways she could never have imagined, and that help would arrive from the most unexpected of places.
The night settled over Willow Creek, calm yet charged with an undercurrent of tension.
Mary stood at the threshold of a new life, unaware that the choices she had made, the people she had trusted, and even the stranger she had yet to meet, would shape her destiny in ways both surprising and profound. The Thompson home was quiet as Mary and her new husband arrived, the soft glow of lanterns lighting the path from the street. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and fresh bread, a comforting scent that could have eased Mary's worries if her mind weren't swirling with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the familiar yet unfamiliar space, noticing little changes that made the house feel like a new world. The walls seemed a little higher, the shadows a little deeper, and the rooms that once felt open and safe now held a strange sense of expectation. Mary's husband gave her hand a gentle squeeze, as if sensing her unease. "It's going to be all right," he whispered softly. His voice carried warmth, but it also carried the weight of uncertainty. Willow Creek, as lovely as it was during the day, could feel very different when the sun went down. Old rules, long-standing traditions, and unspoken expectations hung in the air like invisible threads, and Mary could feel them brushing against her, tugging at her confidence. Meanwhile, the town itself was settling into the evening. The streets were mostly empty now, except for a few lantern-lit windows showing life behind closed doors. Neighbors had returned home, families had finished their dinners, and the distant sound of a dog barking echoed through the calm night. The rhythm of Willow Creek was familiar yet unpredictable, and that unpredictability weighed heavily on Mary. She tried to focus on the warmth of her new home, on the small comforts of the familiar, but an unease remained lodged deep in her mind. Up the road, at the edge of town, the saloon was alive with quiet activity. Soft clink of glasses and the low murmur of conversation filled the room. Jake sat at the bar, his head resting on one hand, a glass of whiskey in the other. His eyes were distant, watching the flicker of the candlelight, thinking about the day, about the people he knew, and about the odd feeling in the air. Willow Creek had a rhythm, a way of moving through life that everyone understood, but tonight, something felt different. He couldn't place it at first, just a sense that something important, something unusual, was about to happen. Back in the Thompson home, Mary moved from room to room, her hands brushing over the furniture as if she could absorb comfort from the familiar wood and fabric. Her mother had given her a small basket of baked goods, a tradition in their family to welcome a bride into her new home. Mary smiled faintly, setting the basket on the kitchen table, trying to take comfort in simple routines. But as she did, a quiet knock at the door made her pause. It was not unexpected. Neighbors often came by after weddings to offer congratulations, but something about the timing made her heart quicken. Her husband opened the door to a young cousin from the groom's family. She stepped inside, her face serious yet polite. "Congratulations," she said softly. "We wanted to stop by and see you." There was an odd tension in her eyes, and Mary noticed it immediately. Though she smiled politely, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more behind the visit than simple congratulations. The cousin lingered, glancing at the shadows in the room, and Mary felt a shiver of nervousness. As the evening wore on, whispers began to reach Mary from the edges of her awareness. She could hear voices outside the room, faint but deliberate, speaking in low tones. It was difficult to make out the words, but the feeling was unmistakable. There was a plan being discussed, something she did not understand, but instinctively feared. Her heart raced, and she clutched the edge of the table for support. The warm, comforting glow of the lanterns now seemed to cast shadows that crept along the walls like silent watchers. Mary's husband tried to reassure her, holding her hand tightly. "Don't worry about what you don't understand," he said quietly. "We will face it together." His words brought some comfort, but Mary could not entirely banish the gnawing sense that she was about to step into unknown territory. She had always known that life in Willow Creek had rules, some old, some unspoken, but she had never truly understood how those rules could weigh on a young bride. Meanwhile, Jake remained in the saloon, sipping his drink and observing the town with a keen eye, even in his slightly distracted state. A few patrons spoke in hushed tones about the wedding and the young bride, sharing rumors they had heard through the day. It was the kind of gossip that often circulated in small towns, harmless in itself. But tonight, it struck Jake in a way that made him uneasy. Bertuse. Something about the way the stories were told suggested that Mary might be in a difficult position, perhaps in need of someone to intervene if things went wrong. The night grew deeper, and the streets of Willow Creek became quieter still. Crickets chirped in the fields beyond the town, and a soft wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of earth and grass. Inside the Thompson home, Mary moved to the window and peered out at the moonlit town. The world outside seemed calm, peaceful even, but the tension inside her chest refused to settle. Best, she could feel a heavy weight pressing down on her, a mixture of fear, uncertainty, and anticipation. It was as if the night itself were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The cousin eventually left, offering another polite congratulations, but her departure did little to ease Mary's anxiety. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to grow longer, the silence heavier. She could hear faint noises outside, doors closing, footsteps on the wooden porch, but they were too subtle to identify clearly. Each sound made her heart beat faster, and she felt an instinctive need to be vigilant, to watch, to understand what might be coming next. Her husband noticed her unease and guided her back to the living room. "Try to rest," he said gently. Tomorrow is a new day, and everything will feel different in the morning." Mary nodded, but sleep was elusive. Her mind kept returning to the rumors she had heard growing up, the stories about strict families, old customs, and the ways people sometimes held on to traditions without thinking of the consequences, around in desperation. She knew that some families in Willow Creek valued appearances and obedience over kindness and understanding, and that thought made her heart tighten. Far across town, Jake finally set down his glass and stood. But he had finished his drink, but found he could not leave entirely. There was a sense of restlessness in him, a pull toward the unknown events unfolding in the quiet town. He had always been a wanderer, moving from place to place, rarely settling down. But tonight, something inside him pushed him to pay attention, to notice the details that others might overlook. Even in his casual, slightly inebriated state, he could sense that something important was about to unfold, something that might require courage and quick thinking. Back at the Thompson home, Mary finally sat down in a rocking chair, trying to steady her racing thoughts. She looked around the room, noticing the familiar furniture, the small trinkets left by her mother and family over the years, and tried to focus on the comfort of those small, ordinary things. Desk. She reminded herself that she was not alone. Her husband was by her side, and they would face whatever came together. Still, the sense of unease lingered, like a shadow at the edge of her vision, reminding her that life often held challenges she could not yet foresee. The night deepened, and a soft fog began to roll in from the nearby fields, covering the town in a thin, silvery blanket. The streets were empty, the homes silent except for the occasional sound of a shutter creaking or a floorboard groaning under its own weight. Mary felt a chill run down her spine, but she told herself it was only the cool night air. She focused on the warmth of her home, the familiar scents, and the presence of her husband, drawing courage from those simple comforts. Hours passed slowly, each minute stretching longer than the last. Mary tried to keep her mind occupied, tidying small things around the house, arranging flowers, and thinking about the life she wanted to build with her husband. She reminded herself that fear was often the product of imagination, that most days in Willow Creek were calm and predictable, and that she had already faced challenges before in her life. Yet the unease in her chest refused to dissipate entirely, reminding her that vigilance was sometimes necessary, even in the safety of home. Meanwhile, Jake wandered out of the saloon and onto the quiet streets, the fog curling around his boots as he walked. Something in the air felt heavy, charged, as if the town itself were holding its breath. He noticed the faint glow of lanterns in the Thompson home, a beacon in the fog, and for reasons he could not fully explain, he felt a pull toward it. Even in his inebriated state, he had a sense that this small house, this young bride, might soon become the center of events that could require someone to act decisively, someone willing to step into the unknown. Mary sat by the window again, watching the fog drift across the streets. She felt a mixture of fear, anticipation, and hope. Tabulous. She knew that life was full of surprises, some pleasant, some challenging, and that courage often meant facing the unknown with a steady heart. She drew her husband close, holding on to him as tightly as she could, seeking comfort in the warmth of his presence. In that moment, she resolved to face whatever the night might bring with determination, trusting that help could arrive in the most unexpected ways. The night was deep and still, yet inside the Thompson home, a quiet tension lingered. Mary sat by the window staring at the fog curling around the lanterns outside, her hands trembling slightly. She could hear the soft creak of the floorboards as her husband moved about the house, trying to make everything feel ordinary. He spoke softly, offering words of comfort and reassurance. But Mary's heart would not settle. Something about the night felt different, as if the shadows themselves were holding their breath. Every little sound made her jump. The distant clatter of a wooden shutter, the soft scratching of a branch against the window, even the whisper of the wind across the roof. Her mind spun with worries, imagining situations she hoped would never come to pass. Respectful and diligent in following the rules and expectations of Willow Creek. Yet tonight the familiar streets, the worn house, and the presence of her husband were not enough to chase away the growing unease. Across town, Jake walked slowly through the fog-draped streets. The saloon had emptied hours ago, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Normally, he would have sought his usual bedroll outside town or moved on to another place to chase new opportunities, but tonight, something held him there. A quiet pull, a sense of responsibility he couldn't explain, guided him toward the Thompson home. Even though he was a wanderer, even though the town held no obligations for him, he felt compelled to keep moving forward, to check on what might be happening behind the softly glowing windows in the distance. Breath. As Jake approached, he noticed the faint light flickering in the Thompson windows, a small beacon against the dark, foggy night.
His steps slowed instinctively.
The night was unusually quiet, the usual sounds of animals and distant voices replaced by a calm that felt almost too heavy. Something about the scene made him wary, yet he could not turn away. There was a story unfolding here, a story that might need attention, and Jake had learned over the years that ignoring such moments often left regrets behind. Inside the house, Mary was growing restless, breaking in. She moved from room to room, tidying what little she could, trying to occupy her mind with mundane tasks. Yet each time she paused, the quiet of the house pressed against her ears, making her hyper-aware of the world outside. But she could sense something stirring beyond the walls, though she could not define it. The fog outside the window seemed to move differently, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to lean closer as though observing her every move. Mary's husband noticed her unease and suggested they sit together. They settled in the living room, the soft rocking of the chair and the warm glow of the lanterns providing a small measure of comfort. "We can face anything together," he said gently, holding her hand tightly. Mary nodded, drawing courage from his words, but the tension in her chest would not release. She tried to focus on the warmth, on the safety of home, but an instinctive feeling told her to remain alert, to be ready for whatever the night might bring. Meanwhile, Jake arrived at the edge of the Thompson property. The fog wrapped around him like a soft blanket, muffling his footsteps and making the house appear distant and mysterious. He paused, observing the quiet home, listening to the soft hum of life within. But he could not explain why he had come, only that something about the night had drawn him here, that perhaps his presence might matter in a way he had not yet understood. He moved closer, keeping to the edges of the property, careful not to draw attention. The house felt alive in the fog, every lighted window hinting at the lives unfolding inside. Mary, unaware of the visitor nearby, continued her quiet pacing, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She paused by the window once more, staring out at the dim glow of the lanterns in the fog, sensing the presence of someone outside, though she could not see clearly. At that moment, a sound broke the stillness, a sudden clatter, not loud enough to alarm anyone, but enough to stir the attention of both Mary and Jake. Mary's heart leapt, and she pressed herself against the wall, her mind spinning with possibilities. Was it a branch falling in the wind, or was someone there, approaching the house with intentions unknown? Narration. The tension tightened around her chest, making each breath feel heavier. Jake, sensing the same disturbance, paused and listened. He realized that someone inside the house might be feeling uneasy, perhaps afraid. The thought strengthened his resolve. He raised his voice slightly, not to threaten, but to announce his presence. "Hey!" he called, letting the sound carry across the foggy yard. The echo rolled softly over the empty streets, catching Mary's attention immediately. Startled, Mary moved toward the door, uncertain whether to open it. Her husband stepped beside her, his presence a steadying force. Together they approached the front entrance, unsure of what awaited them. Outside the fog swirled, making the figure of Jake appear and disappear like a shadow. He raised his hands to show he meant no harm, though his rugged appearance and the slightly wild look in his eyes made it hard to judge him at first glance. Desperate. "Who's there?" Mary called softly, her voice quivering slightly. Jake took a careful step forward, keeping his hands visible. "My name's Jake," he said in a calm, steady tone. "I was passing through town and thought I'd check in. Something felt off tonight." His voice carried a sincerity that eased the tension in Mary's chest, even as her heart continued to race from the unknown. Mary's husband looked at the figure, then back at Mary. "Do you know this man?" he asked quietly. Breath. She shook her head, her curiosity mingling with caution. Jake smiled faintly, sensing the unease. "No harm," he said simply. "Just someone who noticed a quiet night that felt unusual. Sometimes it's best to have an extra set of eyes around." His words, though simple, carried weight. They implied care, observation, and readiness to act if needed, and Mary instinctively felt a measure of relief. The three of them stood at the doorway for a few moments, the fog swirling softly around their feet. Inside, Mary's imagination had run wild with scenarios, but Jake's presence grounded her. He wasn't part of the family, he wasn't involved in old traditions, and yet here he was, alert, observant, and ready to lend quiet support if the night demanded it. Mary realized that sometimes courage came in unexpected forms, and sometimes help arrived when least expected. Czar. As the night deepened further, Jake and the couple moved inside to sit together. The lanterns cast soft, warm light across the room, and the fog outside softened the edges of the night, making the home feel cocooned in quiet safety. Rest. They spoke softly, exchanging small talk at first, then slowly revealing their concerns about the town, its customs, and the pressures that sometimes weighed heavily on families and young couples. Mary shared some of her worries, speaking of the stories she had grown up hearing and the fears that had crept into her heart that evening. Brace. Jake listened attentively, nodding occasionally, not dismissing her fears but offering reassurance that courage often came from understanding, observation, and calm action. His presence reminded her that strength could be found not only in confrontation but also in awareness, preparedness, and the willingness to act with integrity when the moment arrived. The night passed slowly, each hour carrying a subtle sense of tension that never fully left. Yet with Jake's presence, Mary felt less alone, less vulnerable. His calm vigilance, even in a slightly distracted and wandering manner, created a shield of reassurance that allowed her to breathe more freely. She began to realize that help could come in the most unexpected ways, and that courage was not only about facing dangers, but also about recognizing allies when they appeared. Hours later, the first hints of dawn began to touch the horizon, painting the sky in pale shades of pink and orange. The fog had lifted slightly, revealing the town in a soft, gentle light. Mary sat quietly, reflecting on the night, realizing how fragile peace and safety could feel in a small town with strong traditions.
Yet she also recognized the importance of vigilance, courage, and the support of those willing to act with integrity.
Jake rose to leave. His work as an observer and quiet protector done for the night. Mary and her husband stood at the doorway, watching him move into the slowly brightening streets.
Thank you,
Mary said softly, her voice full of gratitude. Jake nodded with a faint smile, tipping his hat.
"Just keeping an eye out," he replied simply, disappearing into the lightning morning.
Mary closed the door, feeling a mixture of relief and newfound understanding. The night had tested her patience, her courage, and her ability to remain calm under uncertainty. But it had also shown her the value of unexpected allies, the importance of observation, and the quiet power of courage and vigilance. She held her husband's hand tightly, feeling the warmth and comfort of home, and realized that while challenges might come, she had the strength and the support to face them. The first morning light filled the house with warmth, and Mary felt a sense of hope she had not experienced the night before. The town of Willow Creek continued its slow, steady rhythm, but Mary now understood that life in such a place required both courage and awareness. And she knew that sometimes, even in the quietest hours, help could arrive from the most unlikely of sources. Morning in Willow Creek arrived slowly, carrying with it a soft glow that touched the wooden rooftops and lantern-lit streets. The sun's light seeped through the mist, warming the town and bringing life back to the quiet streets. Birds chirped cheerfully in the trees, and the faint scent of dew and freshly cut hay drifted through the air. After the tense night, Mary Thompson opened her eyes to the new day, feeling a mixture of relief and calm, though her thoughts still lingered on the events that had kept her awake until dawn. She rose from the small bed in her room and looked around the house. The walls, bathed in the morning light, seemed to breathe a gentle reassurance breath. The small cracks in the wooden floors, the simple furniture, and the soft blankets felt like old friends. Mary ran her fingers over the edge of the bedspread and took a deep breath, realizing that the quiet comfort of her home was one of the most precious things she possessed. Her heart, which had raced with fear and worry throughout the night, now beat more steadily, a reminder that courage could be found in even the most ordinary places. Her husband, already awake, was tidying the small kitchen. The aroma of freshly baked bread from the previous evening still lingered in the air. Seeing her enter, he smiled warmly. "Good morning," he said softly. "You slept well?" Mary nodded, her lips curving into a small smile. "As well as I could," she replied, glancing out the window at the town slowly waking up. "It feels different today." He took her hand gently. "Bration." "Yes," he agreed. "Today is a new day, and with it comes new hope." Mary stepped outside to greet the morning air, her bare feet brushing against the cool, dew-kissed grass. The streets of Willow Creek were stirring, with neighbors stepping out of their homes, greeting each other with waves and soft smiles. Children ran down the lanes with laughter, carrying small bundles of flowers from their morning play. The town felt alive again, and Mary could sense a quiet reassurance in the rhythm of ordinary life. The fear from the previous night, though still present in memory, no longer dominated her thoughts. Perhaps. She returned to the house feeling a sense of gratitude for the simple beauty of life in Willow Creek. Sitting by the kitchen table, she reflected on the events of the night before. Her fears had been very real, yet she had discovered something invaluable. Strength in herself, courage to remain calm, and the reminder that help often comes in the most unexpected ways. Jake, the wandering cowboy who had appeared at the edge of the house in the fog, had not only brought calm to a tense situation, but it also reminded her that courage could be quiet and steadfast. The thought of Jake brought a small smile to Mary's face. Though he had not been a close friend, his presence had made a difference, showing that even in a world filled with uncertainty, there were people willing to act with kindness and integrity. Breaths. She realized that bravery was not always about bold actions or loud confrontations. Sometimes it was about being observant, willing to step forward, and offering support when it was needed most. As Mary prepared breakfast, the door opened gently. It was her mother, Mrs. Thompson, carrying a small basket filled with fresh bread, fruit, and a few simple treats. Her face was warm, yet Mary could sense the lingering concern from the night before. "Good morning, Mary," she said softly. "I thought you might like a little something for the morning." Mary reached out to take the basket. "Thank you, Mother." "I appreciate it," she replied, her voice filled with warmth. They shared a brief, comforting hug, a quiet acknowledgement of the challenges Mary had faced and the support she had received from her family. As they ate, Mary and her husband spoke quietly about the future. The previous night had reminded them of the importance of communication, trust, and mutual support. They discussed their plans for the coming weeks, their hopes for their home, and the simple joys they wished to share together. Mary felt a sense of empowerment she had not experienced before. The night had tested her resolve, yet she had emerged stronger, more aware, and more confident in her ability to face challenges. Meanwhile, in the streets of Willow Creek, life continued with its gentle rhythm. Neighbors visited each other, exchanging morning greetings and small gifts of food or flowers. The town itself seemed to acknowledge the arrival of a new day, the tension of the previous night slowly dissolving into routine. Mary watched from her window as the sun climbed higher, illuminating the familiar sights with a fresh perspective. Even the old wooden fences and the weathered church steps seemed to carry a sense of new possibility, reminding her that each day brought opportunities for growth, understanding, and kindness. As the morning progressed, Mary noticed a small group of townspeople gathered near the Thompson home. Curious, she stepped outside to see what was happening. Among them were neighbors she knew well, smiling and offering warm congratulations on her marriage. Breaths. Yet there was also a quiet sense of acknowledgement for the events of the previous night, a subtle recognition that courage, vigilance, and support had played a role in ensuring safety and well-being. Bess. Mary felt a wave of gratitude for the community, for their concern, and for the silent ways in which they upheld the values of care, respect, and integrity. Mary's husband joined her outside, his hand in hers. Together, they exchanged greetings with the townspeople, sharing smiles and small talk. The warmth and kindness of their neighbors provided a sense of comfort and reassurance. It was a reminder that even in a town where traditions could sometimes feel heavy, there were people willing to act with understanding, compassion, and fairness. Mary realized that her courage paired with the support of others could make a meaningful difference in the way she experienced life. Later that morning, a soft knock came at the door. Mary opened it to find Jake standing on the threshold, his hat in hand, a faint smile on his rugged face. "Good morning," he said simply. "I just wanted to check in, make sure everything is all right." Mary felt a sense of relief at the sight of him. "Thank you, Jake," she replied warmly. "Everything is better now, and we are grateful for your help." Her husband nodded in agreement. "Your presence made a difference," he said. "We appreciate it more than you know." Jake shrugged lightly, a modest gesture. "Sometimes it's just about noticing when someone might need a little support," he said. And being willing to step forward. Mary realized the truth in his words. Courage did not always need to be grand or dramatic. It could be quiet, steady, and deliberate, simply being present when it mattered most. Jake tipped his hat politely and began to leave, disappearing down the street as quietly as he had arrived. As the day wore on, Mary found herself reflecting on the lessons of the night before. She realized that life was unpredictable, filled with moments that tested patience, courage, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. Yet she also understood that help and support could come from the most unexpected places, and that human kindness often appeared in subtle, quiet ways. The events of the previous night had strengthened her, giving her a deeper understanding of her own resilience and the value of community. By midday, the Thompson home was filled with laughter, conversation, and the aroma of fresh food breaths. Mary and her husband moved with ease through the rooms, attending to small tasks, sharing stories, and embracing the simplicity of daily life. The tension of the previous night had faded, replaced by a renewed sense of hope and optimism. Mary felt a deep sense of gratitude, not only for her own courage, but for the presence of those who had shown vigilance, integrity, and care. In the afternoon, Mary took a walk through the town. She observed the townspeople going about their daily routines, each person contributing to the rhythm and life of Willow Creek. Children played in the streets, women tended their gardens, and men worked quietly in the fields. The town felt alive, vibrant, and full of promise. Mary realized that life was composed of ordinary moments, each carrying the potential for meaning, courage, and connection. She felt a sense of harmony with her surroundings, recognizing that strength and hope often lived in the quiet, everyday actions of people who cared. As evening approached, Mary returned home with a renewed sense of peace. She and her husband prepared a simple dinner together, laughing softly over small mistakes and sharing quiet conversation. The house, once heavy with the tension of uncertainty, now felt warm, safe, and full of life. Mary realized that she had learned an invaluable lesson. Courage was not only about facing danger, but also about appreciating the quiet strength found in home, community, and the support of others. That night, as Mary settled into bed, she reflected on the events of the past day and the lessons they had brought. She thought of Jake, the wandering cowboy who had appeared at the right moment, reminding her of the importance of presence, awareness, and willingness to help. Breaths, who had provided steady support and comfort, and of her family and neighbors, whose care had been unwavering. Mary understood that courage, kindness, and vigilance were often intertwined, shaping the way life unfolded in ways both subtle and profound. As she drifted off to sleep, Mary felt a sense of gratitude and hope. The night that had begun with uncertainty and tension had ended with reassurance, understanding, and a deeper awareness of the strength within herself and in the world around her. But in a small town with long-standing traditions could be navigated with courage, patience, and trust. And sometimes, help arrived in the most unexpected of forms, reminding her that no one truly faces challenges alone. The first rays of dawn crept through the window, illuminating the room with soft light. Bravely savoring the calm, and whispered a quiet promise to herself to carry the lessons of courage, vigilance, and gratitude into every day, to embrace life with awareness, and to remain open to the unexpected kindness of others. The town of Willow Creek continued its gentle rhythm outside, a steady backdrop to the life she was beginning, with hope, understanding, and quiet determination.